who are new to this meeting. So my name's Jonathan Downs. I lead the policy team at Oldham Council, and I also have the privilege of chairing the Cork Council's Innovation Network Officer Network. So welcome to all the new faces we've got with us today. The focus of today's meeting and today's conversation is, of course, the cost of living crisis. At previous meetings, we've all been speaking about how our authorities were preparing or planning to respond to the cost of living crisis, and we thought it'd be really useful to have a bit of a discussion about what's going on across our different patches. My colleague Amanda Richardson's here today to sort of talk about some of the work that's going on in Oldham. We've recently held a cost of living summit in July, which brought together partners, communities and council services to really think about how we respond as a place to this crisis. And Amanda's going to talk us through today some of that feedback. But we'd also really welcome hearing from all colleagues on the call about what's happening in their local levels, especially I think following yesterday's announcements about the new PM and the proposed £100 billion package that's apparently going to be coming down the line pretty quickly from government in terms of providing some much needed additional support. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Amanda to sort of talk us through what we've been doing in Oldham, and then I'll probably pick up a little bit of the conversation in terms of some of the next steps once Amanda's finished, and then maybe we can move into an open discussion and any questions. But Amanda, I'll hand over to you, and hopefully you'll be able to share your presentation with us.
Good morning, colleagues. Yeah, just to say, I'm not sure I've shared anything on Zoom before, so if there is a hiccup, bear with it, and we'll try and get past that and get the slides to you. Just bear with me. Can everybody see that?
Yep, we can see that.
Brilliant. That was easier than Teams, actually, I have to say. I think I might use Zoom again. Yeah, colleagues, so as Jonathan said, cost of living, key priority for our newish leader of the council, Councillor Chatterton. Once she did get in post, we were given the task of quite quickly jumping on to the cost of living as a priority and needing to work together across the system to tackle what we knew was going to be a real challenge in Oldham. So we moved pretty quickly, as Jonathan said, to arrange a cost of living summit where we brought everyone together, key partners, our Poverty Truth Commission, youth councillors, to discuss this basically, and more than that, start to do some action planning around what we could potentially do to get ahead of the curve. So a bit of background, this will not be news to anybody, but again, things seem to change so quickly at the moment with everything to do with cost of living that I thought it might be helpful just to go through some of the latest facts and figures, which I'm sure we're all aware of. But in a nutshell, this is not looking great, and it's certainly not looking great for people on low incomes, fixed incomes, who have little or no financial buffer against these rising costs. And of course, inflation impacts differently to a greater extent on those folks, because they spend a larger proportion of their income on the essentials, and it's the essentials that are largely driving the spike in inflation. So as we know, we're up at 10% inflation now, predicted to rise even further by the end of the year, and some scary reporting from Citibank, which was even suggesting as high as 18% next year. So again, regular review of the price cap now. Hopefully, you know, there will be some more support coming out of government pretty quick, but we are in a position where people just simply cannot afford those bills en masse. In Oldham, a real challenge for us. We've just got some latest stats here on the number of households in food poverty, or in our case experiencing hunger, fuel poverty as well. Our incomes are generally low in the borough, which means obviously a greater proportion of our households will be impacted. And although our unemployment rates are coming down, that isn't as much as some of the other boroughs in GM, and we've still got the highest rates. We have a really challenging time ahead. So as part of Cost of Living Summit, we came up with a new brand that we had an active comms campaign around from the summit and since, to promote the work we're doing. We work closely with our comms team on that. The summit itself, that the folks you can see in the background are our Poverty Truth Commissioners. So we fed in their lived experience to the summit. But basically it was to bring together across council services, key services and departments. We had a couple of reps there from local businesses, our voluntary sector, other organisations like our housing associations were there, to discuss basically how we collectively respond. So in order to facilitate that thinking and to do that action planning, we looked across 5 key areas that are listed there. So basically what we considered to be the costs that people would be struggling most with, but that are actually essential to keeping households running. And then secondly, we would then action plan to see how we could coordinate resource to help people basically through the winter. So it's worth saying at this stage that this was very much seen as a short-term, immediate response to get aid out to people to help them through the winter, rather than that necessarily that medium to longer term planning. We had about 100 people. I think we might have had about 102 people on the day. So really phenomenally well attended, and we held it at one of our children's centres in the borough. So in terms of, to give you a feel for the day, the morning session basically was focused on listening to residents and understanding the impact of the cost of living on them, or potentially what that could be. High profile event, opened by our CEO and our youth mayor. Input from Children's Society, Children North East and Greater Manchester Poverty Action. Importantly, our Poverty Truth Commissioners gave us their insight into what they felt was happening, as did some of our youth counsellors. And we had a couple of, well, 2 or 3 really powerful case studies from our doorstep engagement teams. People obviously are really worried and increasingly concerned about how they're going to manage through the winter. The afternoon was basically around the action planning. So we'd sort of done the listening and the interaction in the morning, and in the afternoon we had a series of smaller group workshops focused on each of those themes, where people came together basically to think what they could do. So ideas for action. So what I thought would be helpful is if I just pulled together a few, this is only a few examples under each theme that people were suggesting on the day. Obviously I don't need to run through all of those because you can see them, but certainly that recognition of the need to really make sure we are consistently messaging and promoting the support that is available, working across our partners on that. including with GM colleagues, with our housing association colleagues, so that people are accessing the help with food that they can get. And obviously things like free school meals open up other access to other benefits for people as well. So we were looking at also where we could add value, using the hug vouchers that we can get from GM to extend that support for families who may not be eligible for the holiday activity fund. Investing funding, obviously we need to keep our food bank operating for emergency food, but also looking at how we can support food clubs and pantries that will help to keep people away from that crisis point. Development of community fridges. There's a hubbub pilot in Failsworth at the minute, so you know it was suggested that we could look at how we could build on that or extend from that, and support for community food growing, and you know, could we do more to provide support for breakfast clubs. So I'll quickly run on to fuel and energy. Increased funding for our Warm Homes programme so that we can help more people who need help to pay the bills in an emergency situation. We did cover, and we do cover, things like boiler repair and help towards boiler replacement. But we're also thinking we may extend that as well, you know, to perhaps be able to provide warm clothes, warm bedding, things that link over to our local welfare assistance scheme. So again, a bit of thinking around, could we extend what we currently do? Could we top that fund up? Again, a couple of examples listed there. Provide warm banks. This is the idea of warm spaces, really, which a lot of you will probably be familiar with. There's been quite a lot of coverage in the press around different local authorities looking to open up community buildings to offer people access to warmth and shelter, basically, for a longer time during the day, should they not be able to afford to turn the heating on at home. It was suggested that we produce a cost of living brochure for everybody that basically brought all support together in one place, and to try and get that out to every household. The point was made that please don't put this all online, because people were still concerned that some folks just can't access that online. And again, an idea to promote car sharing. And in GM, young people can travel for free. I think it's between 16 and 18. But there's a £10 cost for the card. So it was suggested that we might want to look at that. And again, it's something that I think GM colleagues would be looking at. Income maximisation, access to financial and debt advice, key to the approach to trying to help people to manage and keep away from that crisis point. So again, some suggestions there. The money advice referral tool is something that was developed with GM, Greater Manchester Poverty Action, and ourselves in Tameside sort of trialled the development. We've had some really, really good feedback on that. Basically, it pulls together in one place all the support that's available across these key areas in Oldham. But it goes a bit further than that. It prompts a discussion with people who are presenting for help around what the underlying issues might be, and then enables the person who's trying to help to signpost to other people who might be best placed to give them that more specialist advice. Again, you can see there expanding the local welfare that we do have available, and looking at how we can support welfare rights and financial advice services, working with Citizens Advice amongst others on that. Housing, again, a few ideas here. Again, to speak for themselves, extend our discretionary housing payment schemes so that we can help to prevent eviction through contribution to the payment of arrears. Continuing to support the A Bed for Every Night scheme to get people off the streets through the winter. Again, some ideas there around, can we look again at debt collection and the role that plays and how we deal with that in terms of trying to engage people more proactively in terms of what other financial help and support may be available. Again, a proposal or a suggestion to see if we could extend selective licensing so that we can build up relationships with landlords, get information on support that may be available for their tenants to them and to their tenants. Again, you know, obviously to try and prevent evictions and to try and make sure people do have access to things like a working boiler through our warm home scheme. Childcare and school, costs for childcare are high, as we know. And again, with the other pressure on family incomes, some concern around this and people not or struggling to pay childcare fees. So we started to look at what we could do in and around that to try and relieve some of that pressure on household budgets. So again, a bit of overlap here, blurred lines between all the things really. For example, in terms of the holiday activity fund, free school meals, etc. And again, promotion, awareness of help that may be available to people. Lots of ideas there. So this all happened on this day, on the 27th of July. Where we're currently up to is we are now taking those ideas as a council and beginning to look at what we could possibly do across those different areas to provide the maximum support that we can. And this is in advance of having another discussion with the partnership to basically get an idea of what other people could do as well. But basically, we're looking at a response across those 5 key areas. So for us, this is going to be our focus, and under each of those broad areas of intervention, there will be more detailed plans, which Jonathan can perhaps tell you a bit more about. Once we've got to a stage where we have a set of proposals, we'll seek obviously cabinet approval for that. We were trying to move quite quickly and get this to cabinet on the 19th of September, but as we all know, we have a new Prime Minister who is, you know, hopefully going to come out with some substantial funding to help to support people through the cost of living crisis. So we'll be just pausing that for a minute, waiting to see what comes out from the government, how that relates to what we thought we could do, and then maybe go back, hopefully within a couple of weeks or so, and get approval through cabinet then. As I say, there will be follow-up discussions with partners, and we'll probably take that through to our partnership board. Still to be determined, because we've been having some changes around governance. We have, however, and the council leader sort of announced this at the summit, we've stepped up again our community bronze group. This was the group that gave oversight to delivery of our COVID-19 response. So we have literally stepped up to a crisis response approach. So they will be giving oversight and helping to action that action plan that is finally approved. We have begun work already by stepping that that group back up. And that's very much a partnership group, but at delivery level. Again, I've mentioned the need for us to get clear governance arrangements in place for this. And importantly, and we've touched on this in a meeting this morning, as well as responding to the immediate crisis that people will have over the winter, we're really, really keen now to start thinking about what we do in the medium to longer term, because I think we all know that this isn't going to be over by spring. People are going to be struggling for a good year or two. So we just need to do a bit more thinking around that. So I'll finish there. Happy to take any questions, or Jonathan, if you want to come in on that.
Sure, thanks, Amanda. That was really helpful, really good context setting for the rest of the conversation. I think what we know from Oldham's perspective is that there's potentially, over the winter period, we know there's going to be significant demand across our services from people who are going to be struggling, and it's unlike in previous years, it's not just going to be the people who were already in crisis. As Amanda said, we know there's over 30% of Oldham's population who are already considered to be in poverty, but there's probably another 30 to 40% of our population who are just getting by, who are one paycheck away from being forced into crisis. And our big concern this coming winter is with spiraling costs, not just energy, but food costs, fuel costs, that a lot of those people are going to be forced into crisis. And it's not just going to be a wave of demand that's going to be hitting our front doors as a partnership. It's going to be a tidal wave. It's going to be, tsunami territory. So we're trying to get upstream of this as much as possible now and think about how we build much greater resilience into our systems as a council and as a partnership, but also how we keep people afloat who are going to be struggling in the short term. So though our response is very much focused on getting people through the next 6 months, we are actually thinking, how do we start to ensure that this is a response which has a legacy beyond that short-term intervention? And a big part of that is actually when we're thinking about staffing for any staffing to support this response, we're thinking about that in the much longer term. So we're building in costings for the next 2 years, not just the short term in terms of interventions over the next 6 months. And hopefully that does mean we can start to build in a lot more resilience across the system. What I wanted to quickly talk to you about is sort of taking what Amanda's said about what came out of that partnership discussion is now what is Oldham's response going to look like. And we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to actually think about what we can do as a local authority and where we should be focusing our fire. We've been having conversations behind the scenes with the Integrated Care Partnership and with others to think about the kind of resources that we can allocate at a local level to support this. And at the moment, we're thinking that there'll be a package of interventions that will probably be between £4 and £5 million worth of local resources going into our response for this winter. What that looks like, Nicola, does Amanda need to give me control for me to now share a presentation on my screen? Can you give me?
Everybody can. So don't all do it at once, but
Oh, I see. So hopefully you can all see this. So there were 4 areas that Amanda was sort of talking about towards the end of her presentation in terms of the council's response. So that first area is supporting children and young people. So supporting children and young people is one of the key priorities of the council leader. Again, we know that there's a huge number of children, probably, again, around 30,000 children in Oldham who live in poverty and who are going to be significantly impacted by the cost of living crisis. So we've been thinking about what our offer is to those children and young people. So these are some of the proposals. What I will say is, again, these proposals haven't been to cabinet, so aren't potentially, signed off in terms of definitely going to happen, but I just wanted to give you some early views of some of our thinking. So we're thinking that we're going to provide additional school vouchers for children, probably covering the half term, so the October and the February half term, as well as an additional 2 weeks at Christmas. So at the moment, our food vouchers, as you're probably all aware, only cover 2 weeks over the Christmas period. We want to extend that out, making sure that those children who are most likely to be struggling or going hungry are fed over those holiday periods. Expanding our poverty proofing program. So we've been doing a lot of work with Children North East around poverty proofing in schools, thinking about how we support schools to support their pupils with costs of attending the school day. We're looking to expand that program to all our primary and secondary schools. So that would be around 130 schools we'd be doing poverty proofing work in. Again, expanding things like our holiday activity program and making it a more universal offer too. So that point I made a few minutes ago, that it's not just people who have traditionally been in crisis who are going to struggle. It's also those people who are on the brink of falling into crisis. So making sure that we have a universal offer for children and young people over the school holidays is going to be really, really important. And also expanding our Christmas holiday activity fund. I don't know if everyone else has this, but when we put on holiday activities over the Christmas period, they're often undersubscribed, and we think that's because actually families want to do stuff together over the Christmas holidays. They don't just want to put their kids into holiday provision. So we want to put on a lot more family activities over Christmas, bring people together, and hopefully provide a lot more support for families. So helping families manage and pay their bills, obviously a really, really key bit to our response. So one of the ideas that we've had is about putting cash back into the pockets of people, especially people whose kids have just started reception or year 7. So we're planning a £30 cash payment for kids again who are eligible for free school meals. Again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but actually hopefully if you visit places like Asda and Aldi, you can often get quite a lot for £30 when it comes to school uniforms. The big challenge is still the branded school uniforms and the school uniforms that are sold through those through those specialist shops. They tend to be really, really expensive. However, there has recently been government legislation which is aiming to bring down the cost of those uniforms and stop schools from being able to brand everything up and put logos on everything, which is one of the areas which increases the cost. So that links very much into that proposal around poverty proofing in the school day. As Amanda said, thinking about how we double the size of our Warm Homes Oldham programme, both the staffing and the grants available, so we can support a lot more people. That would potentially mean we could support an additional 400 people a month who are seeking support through that programme. Providing additional citizens advice support in every district. So this is about a place-based offer. We do have welfare rights advisors who are employed directly by the council, but CAB provide that much more specialist advice. We're aware that there's a real issue with the private rented sector here, and we want advisors who can really support people who are struggling with rogue landlords, issues like that. So providing that additional CAB support is really, really important, and communicating this out to everyone. So it's going to be supported, as Amanda said, by a big cost of living campaign. We're going to be leafleting every household in Oldham in advance of winter with the support that's going to be available, as well as having accompanying social media campaigns, stuff on billboards, all the usual type comms channels. The third area, making sure everyone gets the right benefits and support. Again, some really interesting stuff coming out around pension credits, especially around Greater Manchester. In Oldham, we know that there's a huge amount of people who are eligible for pension credits who just don't claim. A big part of that is actually the stigma attached to claiming. It's not just the process. So quite a few people just don't want to claim because they don't want to be seen to be having to seek a handout. But we're trying to break down some of that stigma through the work of the Poverty Truth Commission, making it easier for people to claim, making it seem much more socially acceptable to claim the right benefits. And again, that's a supporting comms campaign around that to make sure that people are taking those benefits on. Big part of that is investing in our community engagement team. So our community engagement team is that team that was established during COVID to go door to door and encourage people to take up their vaccines. We've kept that community engagement team in place, and they're now focusing on cost of living. So still doing that door knocking, making sure that people are okay during the winter months, but also signposting people to the support available across the system. Also expanding the support available to people in financial hardship. So we're putting more money into our helpline, recruiting additional benefits advisors to sit inside our Access Oldham, which is our front door where people come for support. And also providing more support across our library services. So that's about digital skills. I don't know if anyone else, I think quite a few other local authorities do this, but providing SIM cards preloaded with data for people so they can get online. We know that people who can access things digitally tend to be able to get things much cheaper than people who can't. So thinking about how we do a lot more of that. And lastly, of course, protecting our most vulnerable residents. So that's about things like widening the welfare safety net. We're going to be putting a lot more money into the grants available for various things, from childcare, housing, and supporting people with their rising energy costs. They're all discretionary grants. So when people come through the helpline, if people spot that people are struggling, they have the ability as welfare rights advisors to allocate funding to people. Amanda mentioned the warm spaces stuff. So as Amanda said, lots of local authorities are looking at providing warm spaces. One of the things that we're really conscious of is that we don't just want to provide places for people to come and keep warm. We want them to be a real wraparound support offer in those warm spaces. So we're going to have the CAB advisors based in there. We're going to have the welfare rights advisors based in there. So when people come in to keep warm, we're making sure that they are accessing the right benefits. We're making sure that they are supported. And we're also going to be providing some of that digital literacy type stuff in those locations too. So a real wraparound support model around our warm spaces proposals. Potentially investing money in the food bank. Again, that's helping them stock up for winter, but also helping them with things like rent and thinking about what that forward demand profile is going to look like in terms of demand on the food bank. And also, we're going to be allocating money again in a similar way that we did with COVID through our VCFSE sector. And that's to really reach those more marginalised communities who tend not to be who tend not to access the support that's available to them. So Action Together and our VCFSE sector do an awful lot of work making sure that those communities with protected characteristics are supported, especially during those really tough winter months. So that is a really early sort of view of what we are proposing to do as a local authority. You've got to see it before, I think, even leadership's not actually seen these proposals yet. So you've got a really, really early view. So this could all go horribly wrong for me. I could have told you that we're going to do all this and it's just not going to happen. I'm going to get told there's no budget now and that Liz Truss has sorted everything out and we don't need to do any of this anymore, which is, fingers crossed, that'd be absolutely brilliant. But that's some of our early thinking. And as Amanda said, happy to take questions, comments, or just to hear about what anyone else is planning across the system. Oh, Elaine, I can see you're straight up with your hand. Go on.
No, I think it's great, Jonathan, and I was fortunate enough to attend the Poverty Summit, which I thought was really good. I think you had great attendance, and I think the insights that people brought to that conversation were really sort of, positive. I think the only thing, just looking at some of the actions that have fallen out, is I think, it's very difficult, isn't it, that you want to target the most vulnerable. So I've noticed that you are targeting those that are eligible for free school meals, but we know that there are so many people who are just above that threshold. And it's how we start supporting those people as well, identifying them and supporting those people as well. I always find those people who are already accessing benefits are the ones that do get those passported benefits, those access to the household support fund, and I just feel, the people that are just above that threshold are the ones that are really going to struggle this winter. And, it's about what we can do a little bit more for them, really. And if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely, Elaine. So I think a big part of our response is going to be trying to make our offer more universal. So we're still so for example, through the holiday activity fund work I mentioned, we are going to be targeting those people who are in receipt of free school meals, but actually it is going to be a universal offer. It's going to be available to everyone. I think a big part of it is using the data and intelligence that we've got and using it better. So one of the things that we're starting to do across the partnership is think about how we share the knowledge of the people who are potentially struggling already, but who might not be accessing benefits. So we're doing a lot of work with people like our housing associations at the moment, who tend to have a really good idea through their systems of who is struggling in their services. So thinking about how we share that data and intelligence right across the partnership is a really key bit of this ongoing response. And we're planning a partnership meeting following the sort of announcement of our interventions to really think about how we identify those people who are going to potentially be struggling more this winter. I think you're absolutely right. There's an awful lot of work to do, because we just don't really have enough data and intelligence about who is going to be struggling in Oldham, and we need to do a lot more to gather that.
No, it's great, and I think, you know, that's really interesting to sort of know. And I think, you know, we're very similar. We don't know who's going to be impacted, and we've always had this conversation with the cost of living response group that we're going to see more and more people that we've never seen before coming into the system, and actually those are the people that don't know how to navigate it. Just as a side, we had a meeting with the housing needs group meeting across Greater Manchester this morning, and I think what's become apparent is, although Oldham have been great in focusing on housing as being an issue, I don't think people are aware of the wider system impacts of kind of cost of living crisis, and housing is becoming a real issue. So as an example, Rochdale have seen a 300% increase in people from private rented sector presenting at housing options for support. And obviously if someone becomes homeless, they've got children, the impact then on social services and housing in general is just absolutely huge. I don't know whether people are connecting in those wider services in terms of that crisis response and making sure that it is part of their action planning. I know Oldham are very different and did have housing there as part of their key actions, but I'm just interested to see what other people are doing in terms of that housing response. And I think, again, it's great having Greater Manchester housing providers involved, but you've got a huge private rented sector there with, you know, how do you communicate with the landlords, with those private rented sector tenants, but also people who've got mortgages as well. We're starting to see a huge increase in people contacting their banks and building societies, saying that, you know, they want to drop to interest only, which is you know, holding up a bit of a bottleneck really longer term, or actually asking to extend their mortgages as well. So I think, you know, it's just about making sure that we're considering sort of the wider system issues, and not just focus on maybe those immediate food and fuel responses.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. All really, really valid points, and yeah, just a huge amount to think about right across the system. Jonathan.
I just had a detailed question first about warm spaces. You mentioned having at least 3 per district. How many districts do you have within Oldham? Just trying to understand kind of the scale of what you're trying to do. And then secondly, and it may just be that you've not got on to thinking about longer term actions at all at this stage, which is completely fair enough. But what are you thinking in terms of the link between cost of living crisis and community wealth building agenda, cooperative development, etc.?
So we've got 5 districts in Oldham, so we're proposing 15 locations for our warm places. They're going to be a real mixture of council assets, community assets. One of the things that we are doing, linking to Elaine's point earlier, is really trying to get to grips with the demographics of the communities that are going to be most impacted, so we can make sure that the locations are closest to where we think they're going to be needed most. So what we don't want to do, for example, is put one of our warm places in a really remote location, which forces people onto costly public transport to get there and completely defeats the object. So trying to think about, you know, where those locations are and how people access them, really, really important. In terms of the link to the broader community wealth building stuff, I'm going to be really honest, and I've not even started to consider how we link into that broader agenda and sort of that longer term resilience. It's definitely something we need to do, but at the moment our response has been very much on that shorter term response. I can see Amanda's hands up because Amanda leads on our longer term poverty strategy, so she'll probably have a slightly different view to me, Jonathan, so I'll bring Amanda in. Oh, you're muted, Amanda.
Oh, see, I'm still not used to this. Yeah, I think what we are doing, Jonathan, is tying our thinking in around our emergency response to our longer term approach to place-based working, and what the offer is at those hubs in each of those district centres, and what that could potentially look like in the longer term. I think what the cost of living crisis has done, it's accelerated some of that thinking. So, for example, we were thinking some time back in terms of the services that are present in those localities. You know, maybe we should get some frontline welfare support in there, just because we know we have a lot of folk in Oldham who are struggling in one way or another. What the cost of living crisis has done is absolutely accelerated that, so that now we are saying, well, let's get some sort of welfare rights advice support out there on the front line, whether that's citizens advice, whether it's our officers. So I suppose we are trying to look at things in the round and use our approach now, what we might learn from that in terms of what our services might look like at a district level. In terms of that broader partnership work, we've done a lot of work and are on with it at the minute in places like Salesworth around planning around assets that exist in that area to inform this, and that can be not just physical assets but strong community networks, voluntary sector networks, again using this to try and inform our thinking about what that service offer could look like. And within that, we're also looking at, although at the moment it feels a bit on the edges, for example, the development of local community food growing that both supports the immediate cost of living crisis now by giving people access to some fresh food, but longer term will also continue to do that. Maybe look at developing a cooperative linked into our Northern Roots kind of project. So it all feels a bit, not fluffy, ethereal at the minute, but certainly there are some concrete things happening where we are tying this work into our longer term approach in district.
No, that sounds really good.
Thanks, Amanda. Any more questions, comments? So really keen to hear about anyone else's sort of planning that's happening across the system. I assume other authorities are starting to do this work. Morgan.
Hi, yeah, thanks. That's really interesting. I think probably further ahead in Cheshire West and Chester, to be fair. I think the way we'd see it is not that long ago, we passed an inclusive economy strategy. We developed a tackling poverty strategy. So I think we feel like some of the strategic longer term stuff we'd just done the thinking, we were putting things in place. I think what we've had to do is kind of like look to what's the immediate action plan. So that's what we've just been doing to try and kind of catch up in that short term activity. And to be honest, what we're looking at sounds quite similar, certainly themes, a lot of the specifics to what others have talked about. The one theme we've included that wasn't mentioned was mental well-being. So some things around, like we've got a mental health program just been set up for staff internally, trying to promote more stuff we had already around local people about health training, but also putting in health training with a lot of our frontline staff and looking at what we can do so that they can kind of understand the pressures people are under, recognise symptoms and kind of direct people on to further support. So that's one area where I don't think that was mentioned elsewhere. And also looking at things like the impact on domestic violence and drug abuse and those kind of implications moving forward. On fuel poverty, again, we were looking at the warm hubs, as others have said. We're looking more at, I think there's quite a lot of community organisations already have something we can grow this from. So we're looking more about setting up agreeing criteria, using people from our Poverty Truth Commission to kind of get that lived experience view, what we want to see in some of these places. And then we can basically ask people, you know, if you can achieve these minimum standards, we can advertise you, you know, we'll look to fund certain things. If you're just below the standards, how can we grow this so that there's a multiplicity of offers there? But early days for us in taking this forward. But again, around fuel poverty as well, we're looking at things like slightly more medium term, but basically there's an app we're looking to buy in from the Energy Saving Trusts, which costs like 5k set at 1k a year, so people can get that kind of really practical help on looking around their house. What can you do? You like literally wander around the house on the app and it'll tell you what you can do to reduce your fuel bills. You know, I know this is accessible stuff elsewhere, but it's making this as accessible as possible. Also looking at setting up an app to kind of, we have a council app, using that to better explain to people what all this help is for those who aren't sure how to navigate these systems. But again, that's fairly early days, and obviously there'll need to be leaflets alongside that because not everyone's online. But again, we can link that through to our like digital device data lending schemes as well. So yeah, early days, we're kind of thinking about this, but it's really interesting to hear what others are doing, and we'll be stealing as much as we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Morgan. I think the mental health and the staffing piece is really interesting and something that we need to we have started thinking about, but we definitely need to do a lot more on. So I might come back and pick your brains about that at some point in the fairly near future. Ruben.
Hi. The thunderstorm's playing havoc with my connection, so you've just got my dogs at town, I'm afraid. I'll share this with the rest of the group, but we started putting stuff together in sort of May around the council tax rebate, food banks. We have a healthy hub which is around physical and mental health and debt advice and those sorts of things. So we're picking up a lot of the things that you've mentioned previously and in Amanda's presentation. Around money advice, those sorts of things. But the one thing I didn't see, and I don't know if all water companies are doing this, but for us, Anglian Water do have an extra care support team that can sort out personalised payment plans for people. I'll send you the paperwork I've got, but I wonder if that might again, you know, help people with their bills, because that's another thing that they're going to have to worry about as well, in addition to everything else. But yeah, and we also put, I don't think there's a thing called petrol prices, which I think is an app where people can sort out if they need to get in the car. There's a you know, you can look out for what cheapest diesel in your area. And we also have an energy saving trust app, which we've done through our climate change partnership group at county level, where people can do much like Morgan. They can go around the house and make sure they've got excluders and turn off this, that, and the other. You know, we are scrabbling around for anything and everything that will just save people money, as opposed to getting a different kettle from our outgoing Prime Minister, which is something. There you go. But I'll circulate that paper through the True Nicola, certainly.
Thanks, Ruben. And one of the things I know, I'm sure everyone keeps an eye on this, but when we're sort of thinking about our resident newsletters, one of the areas we always look at is the money saving expert site too. So Martin Lewis tends to have so much good advice and information on there, and it just tends to be a good place to signpost residents to. I'd never thought about the water company one, Ruben, though. That's a really interesting one, and one we'll be, again, we'll look into in more detail. I don't know if it is, you know, an offer more from a national level, but that sounds really interesting. Steve.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me okay? My sound this end's a bit rubbish today, but you can hear me fine. Okay, yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a policy pilot. That's not my phone, sorry. A policy pilot that we're doing in Burntwood here in Staffordshire. So we're at Town Council. We're quite a large one, but we're only, you know, a parish council. We have 6 staff. We're looking at what's going on with the cost of living crisis as a bit of an emergency at the moment. I'll tell you a story that probably affects a lot of people, affect a lot of people in your own areas. There's a guy called Joe. He's 72. He's became a widower about 18 months ago. He's got 2 dogs. They're getting elderly. The dogs are going to be on the way out. He's got a state pension and a small private pension and £25,000 in savings. He lives in social rented accommodation. He's generally of good health for a bloke his age, usual old man niggles and so on. Goes to the GP, and GP says, "How you doing, Joe? You know, what's going on with you?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to kill myself." And why is that then, Joe? Well, I've looked at my money, I've looked at my savings, I've looked at what's going on with the electricity bill and the gas bill, and I'm just going to be spending all my savings staying alive. And I want to give my my money to my nephews rather than to the British bloody gas, is what he said. And I thought, you know, I don't want you to do that, Joe. I think, you know, life might be great. You never know what's around the corner. But in some ways, I can't fault your logic. Now, that really moved me. That really touched me, what was going on with that bloke. And, you know, he's lonely. So as a town council, we're thinking, what can we do for Joe? Now, there are the various usual things for elderly and retired people, but Joe's that active retired. You know, he doesn't consider himself to be that old. He knows he's 72. He knows he's in probably the last chapter of his life, but he's still got a lot more to do. So he would not entertain the idea of going to an old person's club or whatever. You know, that's just not for what he does. So we are looking at a warmer welcome, which is a project that we've come up with. I'm seeking emergency funding to pilot it and to get some answers to the many questions that my elected members will have. But I need it to be in place by middle to end of October. So we're moving really quick on that, on a very loose ad hoc kind of base. I'm asking my council for some pump priming money so I can get it started from about the 16th of September. And I've set things up in anticipation that they'll agree with me, which I'm pretty sure they will. And we're going to start looking at doing things that practically can help people. It might be opening up the back room of a pub. It might be connecting up walking groups. It might be anything like that. We don't quite know what the shape of it's going to be. But the idea is to offer people something so they can turn their heating off for 3 or 4 hours, go and do something that's probably free to them at the point of using it, that's something useful for them, whether it's sitting down the pub and having a free hot chocolate and a game of dominoes with me, or going out for a walk with another dog walker over the public open spaces we've got here, whatever it is, and then doing some direct in-depth work to connect those people up. So we're removing stigma. You know, we're creating that sense of community, and you know, that people can really get involved in. One of the things that we're doing as well is that we found this year doing uniform exchanges, uniform recycling stuff. There's no stigma in that anymore. You know, and it's really quite interesting. People, the organisations we're involved with and support that, they're reporting there's a lot of donations and a lot of requests. But, you know, nobody's fearful of sort of saying, I know what it's like. I've got a 15-year-old and he grew about 6 foot in about 3 months. You know, so he grew out of all his trousers before he even wore them. So I wasn't frightened of sort of saying, anybody got any lanky kids who've grown out of their trousers, and I've got some I can throw in the pot as well. And I want to move to that bit where there's no there's no stigma about what we're doing with this warmer homes, warmer welcome thing as well. You know, it's something that people can bring something to and contribute, as well as get something out of. It's not like we're pretending to be Lady Bountiful. Somebody just asked me if we're linked into our social prescriber network. Yes, I am, and it's absolutely overwhelmed at this time. And the social prescribers I know have a case load that's far outstripped what was originally anticipated. There's a huge problem emerging on the horizon. And one of the things that, you know, I thought I'm up to my eyeballs today, but I thought I'd drop into this call and say that one of the places where I get huge amount of support is CCIN. You know, I know that there are you guys there thinking the same things as me, and most of you will work for larger authorities. But if you have ideas, you've got a word of support, anything that you can tell us to encourage us, I'd be really grateful. Just email me at some point. It'd be really good to hear from any of you, just to sort of give us a thumbs up and crack on. And you know, but I think in many towns the size of Burnwood, there's going to be a lot of Joes. Okay, so that's my bit. So thanks ever so much.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Steve. Like I say, really, you know, powerful, really powerful messaging. And I think, like you say, there will be a lot of people struggling like Joe, and it's how we best support those people. Aisling.
So very similar in South Tyneside to what has been described in Oldham and by the other people who've contributed here, including that we've probably stolen the idea of a summit that we're planning later this month. That sounds like it's very similar in agenda and everything, so I imagine somebody on our end has seen what you've done and copied it. But also just generally similar themes emerging in terms of what our response plans are, including that focus on benefits maximisation and on communications and how we can do that differently and better. And I suppose also it's been reassuring to see that we've been having the same conversations around short versus long-term tensions and how we manage that and how that might change. And also questions of whether we target resources or whether we look at strengthening our universal offers. I think that's something we've been having conversations about more widely, but this is, you know, the cost of living work really brings it into close focus and has us questioning whether those we can target our resources are the right people for this crisis, which is different in so many ways to previous challenges. I suppose it's been useful to see little specific practical actions that have dropped out of this. That's been the most useful to me, and I'll be kind of feeding back. But I suppose another thing that doesn't seem to have cropped up much so far has been how we've been using different ways into communities. So one of the things we're looking at is seeing how we can leverage our relationships with schools differently, because they have different relationships with parents and with families than councils do. And then similarly, COVID vaccine programs as a way of targeting kind of over 65s and over 75s, just in terms of providing materials or co-locating our welfare rights advisors and things like that. So I'll not talk too much because I imagine there's others want to speak as well. But yeah, it's been very reassuring to see that a lot of the same things have been discussed across the different councils.
Thanks, Aisling. And I wondered, Nicola, one of the things that, just because we're all sort of working on this agenda, if there's an opportunity to perhaps share some resources, I don't know, in the newsletter or on the website, so people can see what. One of the things that I've been looking at recently is the LGA often have sort of specific pages, don't they, dedicated to pulling together best practice of what's happening across local authorities. So they had the COVID page where they had lots of examples of what local authorities were doing to respond to COVID. And I've noticed they've got a cost of living page now where they sort of coordinate something similar. They don't tend to be updated very regularly. They just tend to sort of have them in place. But I wonder if we could do something from a CCIN perspective like that, where we could share resources and information. I'd be happy to upload, for example, all our presentations, our agendas from our cost of living summit. If other people are doing summits, you're more than welcome to beg, borrow and steal. Aisling, I think I stole some of the not the agenda items, but some of the idea for a cost of living summit from, I think it was the Welsh Assembly who'd done one first. So don't worry, we've all stolen at some point down the line, and it all comes back full circle, doesn't it? But yeah, I think there's definitely something about sharing some of the resources and some of the ideas. Like I'd never have thought about the the water company's idea that Ruben mentioned earlier. So it's stuff like that which we might, you know, that we could all potentially tap into. That would be really helpful to have in one place.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea, and certainly do a special newsletter, so which means uploading everything onto the website so it's already there. And if anybody, any of the ideas that you've had today, I know Mahmouda will capture the minutes, but it's those links really, and anything that you're doing, just drop me a line. I'll just, for those of you who don't know, I'll put it in the my email in the chat. We've got a few political conferences coming up, but if I was to do this next Monday, it means you've got till the end of the week to let me have anything that you've got, and it can be something that's really really sharp and brings those things together. We've actually led on the Oldham Summit in the newsletter that's with Sharon for approval. It also talks about today's very important officer call, but unfortunately I didn't get approval to send it out, but I'm heartened by the fact that there's a whole screen full of people here today. So terrific job on obviously it's a subject that everybody's really keen to share ideas, and how we can all look after each other to make sure that we're all still around in 6 months and that there aren't any Joes, which really touched me, and I had to turn my camera off. So yeah, absolutely can do all of that, and those apps, all of those apps. I'm a money saving expert, recipient of those emails, but anything that you've got that you think would add value that we can share with others, now's the time to do it. So yes, please.
Thanks, Nicola. Before we move on, because I'm very aware that time is racing away from us as always, is there any more on the cost of living item? I think what we'll probably end up doing, because this is obviously, as colleagues have mentioned, going to be an issue that's going to be with us for some time. I think it's probably going to be a topic that we will revisit maybe in 2 or 3 months' time, just to see where we're at as local authorities in our response, and to share some of that learning and best practice, especially I think some of that work that Elaine was mentioning earlier around the actual identification of some of those groups that are going to need support, who are perhaps not accessing support at the moment. That's a really interesting area to think about and focus on, and something that I'm keen to take away and do more work on in Oldham. So that might be something that we can have a look at in more detail at a future officer network meeting. Elaine, I can see your hands up.
Yeah, just to let you know, we do have a Greater Manchester cost of living dashboard, but it's quite reactive, and probably the data that we get is is from all the 10 local authorities. So it's a bit of a snapshot in time, but can see where you need to sort of focus resources. What we have been doing is negotiating with Experian, who have mosaic data, and we're looking at a sort of piece of sort of data they have at the moment, where we can look at if there's an increase in inflation, if there's an increase in interest rates. This piece of sort of data can let you know down to a postcode level who these people, who it will impact across Greater Manchester. But what it also does is also show you where that particular cohort might cut back on. So there was a really good example that they showed us in a demonstration around if interest rates increase, you get a particular cohort who are quite financially affluent, who might cut back on going out, so the impact then on hospitality, and then you can start to see the impact on the economy as well. So it's quite an interesting sort of tool that we are looking at, and we're going to trial it for 3 weeks and see then whether or not we want to purchase it, just because it focuses more on that early intervention and prevention as well. And just a very quick thing as well, just about people going into debt and the possibility of illegal moneylenders rubbing their hands. It's a great opportunity for them at the moment as well, to start targeting people who are vulnerable. We're also in negotiation with the credit union, who in South Manchester piloted, along with Fair for All Finance, a project that was backed by the Treasury to look at no interest loan schemes. And we're looking to spread and scale that across Greater Manchester. I know there was a conversation with all the 10 credit unions 2 weeks ago, but that's to help people over hurdles and looking for people who specifically can't get access to credit. So I think, you know, that'll be something that is really sort of valuable as we move forward, and, you know, to prevent people getting into worse debt and into situations that increasingly impact on their mental health, especially if they start using illegal money lenders as well.
Thanks, Elaine. And actually, that's a one area we didn't really touch today that we might want to look at in a future meeting is the impact on business as well of the crisis and supporting local businesses. So one of my colleagues, I was having a conversation yesterday, her husband's an energy broker for businesses, and apparently the number of businesses who are now contacting energy brokers trying to get a better deal and saying that they are going to close their doors if they can't secure a better energy deal is massive. And you'll have all seen in the media a lot of, I think the focus has been on pubs and hospitality, hasn't it? Sort of saying they're going to have to charge £20 a pint if they want to keep their doors open. A lot of our hospitality trade. So yeah, there's also definitely a real impact on business too, and probably something we need to think about and cover at a future meeting. Amanda.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Just a couple of thoughts really that Elaine's prompted, certainly around the cost of living in the dashboard. Obviously, if we put interventions in place, then we ideally need to see the impact of those. So we're giving some thought, beginning to give some thought to what and how we measure the impact of in terms of this action plan that we're proposing. And I wondered whether there is some crossover there to the development of a cost of living dashboard that sort of goes beyond 3 or 4 key indicators, but doesn't become too unwieldy. So that was just a thought running through my head. And also, I don't know whether colleagues are aware of a tool that's been developed by a company called Policy in Practice, which is almost like a low-income tracker tool. And it basically pulls together lots of different information and can be used proactively to measure the impact of different policy changes. And you can kind of choose your parameters to get to a point where you can identify where people are, roughly how many people will need help or assistance, say that a policy kicks in. So it's something that we've looked at before and we're looking again at, but we are wondering whether we have all the information but not the capacity really to get an officer onto that, to draw it all together to do that proactive work, or actually whether this tool does offer us something different to be able to do that better in any case. So I think data and intelligence is massive in all of this, to prevent but also to understand the impact of what it is we're doing. Then we know for the future where we can best intervene.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you, colleagues, for a really good conversation. I think there's lots to think about and consider, and lots to follow up on it. I think it was a good thing that we blocked out the majority of today's agenda to cover cost of living, because I think we knew it was going to be a fairly detailed conversation. I think we do just have one other agenda item, don't we, Nicola, which is, I think, was it next year's Stir to Action Festival?
We do. Shall I pick this one up?
If you don't mind, that'd be great.
So we've Jonathan Nunn, Rob Gregory, and from Stevenage, who's not on the call, and I went to the Stir to Action Festival in July, which was held in Devon. We were a co-sponsor of that. They've approached us again to see whether we would be interested in sponsoring next year's event. This will be the first one that's not actually taking place in the Southwest. This one is due to take place in Manchester at Stretford Public Hall on the 19th and 20th of May. So one, they've asked if we would like to be a sponsor. Cost for that as a second level sponsor would still be £2,000, and as part of that we would get 12 free tickets to attend. The reason that we're bringing it to you is that we went through a similar process last year, probably a little bit later in the year, you know, and it was all really dark and people were going, yeah, we've got a great opportunity to go to Devon and get to know each other and look at ideas for the new economy and what people are doing across the country. And then there was just the three of us that actually went in July, because life gets in the way and that's what happens. But this one, because it's happening in Manchester and we've got it might be a little easier to get to. It might be something that you're, I think it's a 2-dayer, so those of you that are live in GM, you could probably get home afterwards, so there's not that being away. It's easier to get to. So this is, want to just share that idea with you, see if you think it would be a good idea, whether you want to throw your hat in the ring and that you'd like to attend. I'm sure it wouldn't be as difficult to get 12 people to go next year, but we might also want to have a think about what we want out of that, whether we want, there was the report back at the August meeting, it looked at some of the things, you know, Jonathan Nunn gave a brilliant presentation about all of the sessions that he attended. I was on an exhibition stand the whole time, so I didn't get the opportunity like I would normally have to go and participate and immerse myself. Yeah, over to you. I can see Jonathan's already got his hand up.
I mean, the first thing to say is I wasn't entirely shocked that we didn't get near to the 10 people that we had places for, as taking that much time out and Devon being out a little bit on a limb. Sorry, Nicola. I mean, it's a long way from South Tyneside as an example. But with that in mind, I mean, it being slightly more central in the within the union is helpful. I would certainly want to get over for at least one day, but with all of that in mind, if we can make it so that actually we have 12-day tickets on each day rather than 12 places over the whole thing, then that would enable a bit more flexibility where people can come for both days or just for one of those days. I think that'd be quite helpful.
The thought was in terms of timing, it's right after elections, assuming everyone has elections next year, or we might even have a general election next year. So 19th and 20th of May, I wasn't sure how that fitted in with thinking about how busy you're likely to be. Obviously there are conversations around leaders and cabinets and which don't necessarily affect officers, so it might be a really good time, it might be an absolutely awful time.
Yeah, we have all outs, for example, so it could be quite chaotic come next year, that sort of time. But we obviously being in GM, it does make it easier for us, so we've no excuse really. What I would say,
minuted, Nicola.
what I would say is, could we also open it up to? I know we just made the tickets available. Was it to full members last time, Nicola?
We invited absolutely everybody last time, and we even invited partners of members last time, not as in physical partners, but organisations that people were working with. So we did have, I think some of our tickets went to organisations in Torbay, but they didn't actually tell us. So I think there's a few questions around the administration of it as well. But I think that's a brilliant idea about getting 24-day tickets.
Yeah, I think also making sure like we do get, we make it available, because I think, did we only make it available to associates later on in the day, or did we make it available to associates from the start?
Right from the start, because they were councils.
Yeah. So
affiliates would have been very late, but that was because I would have hoped that they would have paid to go.
Yeah.
But we need you, Jonathan, to confirm that the budget is there, and then the process is that we then take it to EOC, that they will then say yes or no. They might look at the date and go no, but if we had your approval, then we could caveat in that way that you think that
is the sponsorship fixed from Stir to Action? Would they be willing to negotiate a slightly lower sponsorship deal for less spaces?
So no, I could ask there. So the headline sponsorship is £4,000 for 24 tickets, and then £2,000 for 12 tickets.
Yeah, I wonder if it's worth seeking. I know it feels silly to quibble over £1,000, but actually £1,000 during a cost of living crisis is quite a lot for people of taxpayers' money. So
that I thought of is, we said that we wanted to get more of a profile for the CCIN, and maybe what we say is that we will offer, at least 2 councils will have an officer that want to speak on something on the main stage. Obviously, I don't know how it's going to work, and they had 3 stages normally, 3 opportunities to speak. But I think we should be saying, look, if you're serious about asking for our money, then you also should be serious about listening to what the brilliant work that's going on and what a cooperative council is about, and how we're trying to work with communities, because sometimes we hear all the negative stuff.
I was going to say, in giving space to defend ourselves against the council bashing.
Yes, yeah. But if you're happy with that, obviously, there need to be volunteers from this group to speak, because it is more, I think it's more, although we could ask members to speak, but they might go from some, I think that they probably Andy Burnham's probably on the hit list. Shall I take that back to them?
Yeah, I think so, Nicola. It makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Also, just one last call for, because this will be the last opportunity before registration's closed for Mondragon, won't it, to register your interest. Oh, you're on it. Study visit to Mondragon, link in the chat. So if you are interested in going to Mondragon, please can you let Nicola know as soon as possible so we can finalise numbers and arrangements.
Yeah, we've had thanks to everybody that's booked. I think we've sold half the tickets. So if you've not filled out your booking form, you're not on the list. Reminder for those of people that want to go but haven't yet done so. And I think Jonathan got his application in last night, having booked his flights yesterday afternoon. So yeah, really good.
Another thing to add to the to-do list before I go away for 2 weeks, Nicola.
Absolutely. I'm just just very subtle in my direct approaches, as you know.
Get it booked, Jonathan.
Get it booked, indeed.
Get it booked.
Join me on the flight. I'll tell you my seat numbers.
That's it.
And just as a plug, really, Mondragon. We all hear about Mondragon. It's an absolute. Fabulous. It really is a fabulous opportunity. There's a university there. It's number 1 in terms of business banking in the Basque Country. There's 80,000 people that work in co-ops. It really is seen as the creme de la creme in terms of cooperative regions. The network has agreed to pay for accommodation, bed, breakfast, and the €400 to actually do the study visit per person. So because I'm not a travel agent, that's why you're organising your own flights. But that's the only bit that you have to pay for. So if you agree to come on the transport, and it should be. It's a snip to get that sort of intense, in-depth opportunity to see something at the coalface. So it's Sunday to Wednesday. The tour itself is on the Monday and Tuesday, and we'll travel out on the Sunday, and depending on which airport you go back to, travel back on the Wednesday or the Thursday.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nicola. Sorry, Jonathan, did you want to come back in? I can see your hands up.
Not on Mondragon. I was just going to ask about additional policy labs and whether there is a deadline for submissions for those.
So for your one, because we talked about it at the last exec oversight committee, EOC's agreed to take decisions offline before the next meeting. So if you want to submit that, whenever you're ready to submit that, we'll get
Sure.
that. We'll get that through.
Okay, brilliant. Is there a
So-
deadline driven by the financial year for that?
It's passed. It was July the 31st.
Okay.
But Jonathan's in charge of the budget, and I'm sure he's carried forward a little bit of money to make sure that we include this one. Jonathan, before you go away, you've also got the form to complete for Power to Change, the bits I couldn't do to get the £20,000 from them. Jonathan Downs, this is, not Jonathan Nunn, because we need that money.
That was just his wry smile of, oh my word, more things on the to-do list.
It's not a big thing, but they're things that I don't know about in terms of Oldham's finances. So I've done everything that I know the answers to.
It'll be in a very long to-do folder somewhere, Nicola.
Thank you.
I'll try.
Thank you.
I will get to it. Not try.
Yeah.
Try's the wrong word.
Jonathan Nunn's closer to you, so I'll send him round if you don't do it.
Excellent. You'll have to chase me down to Cornwall, but that's fine.
I'll send Nicola after you. She's going to be closer.
That's it. Right. Very quickly, folks. Do we have any other business that anyone else wants to raise? Final 4 minutes. Morgan.
Yeah, hi. Basically, Cheshire West and Cheshire recently had our LJ Corporate Peer Challenge, and we're just waiting for the final report. But one of the things that was raised, I think partly because Sean Director of Telford, who was the Cooperative Council of the Year, the report was that actually members are very aware, or the administration are very aware of us as a council. It's not really quite well known across the borough, across our staff. I think it's something that Nunn found a bit when he did his last policy as well. And he asked people about, their councils being part of the network. Not everyone was very aware of it. So basically, we've one recommendation from the peer challenges could be defining, our role in Cooperative Council as Chester. So we'll ask if anyone else has done any work, if got some ideas, I'd really appreciate some hints and tips. And basically, I'll be doing a bit of desktop research into what we could all do about this. And I'll kind of try and produce a bit of a report that makes it all easier if we need to take forward in our own councils as well. So yeah, basically a plea for you have all done in terms of badging yourselves as cooperative councils.
Thanks, Morgan. So you were just so everyone's aware, you were breaking up a little bit as you were talking there, but I think the ask is how do we promote the fact that we are cooperative councils? Is it across our staff base, Morgan, and more broadly? Is that sort of the ask and any information on how we do that?
That's right.
To get back to you. Great. Okay, no problem. So if everyone could take that away and let Morgan know, I'll come back to you on email, Morgan, with what we've done here in Oldham. It's sort of changed over the years, but I'll come back to you directly if that's okay.
Morgan, if you want to put something in the October newsletter as an ask, then really happy to cover that, because I think it's the lead up to the conference. So the conference is 23rd, 24th of November, and it's about being a cooperative council. It's taking place in Telford. I'm working on the programme. And I think that as people start thinking about that, the booking should go live next week, if they don't go live at the end of this week.
Great stuff. So any more for any more before I let you all go? No? Brilliant stuff. Right, I'll let you all go get some lunch. Have a lovely couple of weeks, and I will see you on the next officer call.
Bye. Good to see you all.
Bye.
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 Bye.